Ready? Hi, Abraham. I've really enjoyed your teachings in the last 2 years since I've come across your teachings. But I also have come across a study or a lecture that I was listening to by this gentleman. His name is Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he is a stem cell research that he's been doing since 1966. And he did a beautiful job in explaining all the functions of the cell. So what I've learned from it is that we're made up of 50 trillion cells. And from the cells, he breaks it down for what their properties are and what the purpose is for each, like the gene, the DNA, and the nucleus. So my question is that he says that we have these receptors in every cell. So we have like 50 trillion to 70 trillion cells that are receptors that are picking up all the vibes. And
we refer to them as points of consciousness.
Correct.
Each of those points of consciousness actually in communication with source energy.
Correct.
Yes.
That's what he says too.
Yes.
So we have these receptors that we are interpreting all this energy, 50 trillion of them all at once.
That when you say that we are interpreting, in other words, give the cells their due justice. Your cells are consciousness who are interacting with source energy.
Right.
But you don't have to include yourself in on that, because talk about not knowing what's in your vortex. You really don't know what's going on in each of those cells. It's not
right. So my question is, if our brain is also made out of cells, and they have these receptors, and these receptors are picking up everything. So I guess my question is, and then he also says something like we're 95% of our bodies functioning unconsciously, and 5% is consciously. So if the receptor is basically our interpretation, which becomes our belief. It's just I heard you say that a thought is.
It's getting a little more complicated than it needs to be. Here's the way we would describe it.
Okay.
And we're not disagreeing with anything that you're saying.
Uh-huh.
But if you look at it this way, it's more manageable for you.
Mm-hmm.
The most important thing to acknowledge is that your cells are consciousness,
mm-hmm.
and your cells, and just follow us through, because if you follow this track, it will make everything that comes later on easier for you. Each of your cells has a non-physical counterpart. In other words, source energy is aware of you on a cellular level. Source energy is aware of you on a vibrational level. Certainly source energy knows you as the personality is you as well.
Right.
Source energy knows you as the intentional being that you are on all the different fronts of frustration, or all of the different fronts of emotion. Your inner being knows you at every level that you are. So as the energy of your source is aware of you on a cellular level, that means that communication is taking place on a cellular level.
Right.
Everything that we are teaching here in this gathering is pointed toward helping you as the conscious genius human captain of the ship of all of these cells, to help you stay out of the way of the communication of the cells between source and cell, to stay out of the way. So, for example, if your body is out of whack in some way, the cells in that part of your body immediately begin calling for assistance. And if you are in the vortex state of being, if there is no misalignment within you, if there's no resistance within you, then the cells ask, the source energy cells answer, and the balance of your body stays in perfect flow. But when the cells feel their imbalance, and it happens all day, every day, in other words, as you are constantly coming up against things, your cells are introduced to things that you ingest, things that you inhale, all kinds of things are coming towards you. As the cells of your body recognize that and then send the request for balancing, they receive the balancing request comfortably. And so it depends upon where you are in relationship to your vortex, how much allowing or resisting you're doing, how well you allow the communication of your cells with their source energy.
Okay, but if our cells have receptors and our receptors are picking up
Well,
the vibrations...
it's not that your cells have receptors, it's that your cells are receptors.
Right.
They are transmitting and receiving mechanisms, yes.
Okay, so then where's the vortex in this? Is it the mind? It's not in the brain. It has to be the mind then, correct?
Well, that's why we were breaking it down just a little bit. In other words, if each of those trillions of cells has an inner being, all of those are in the vortex. In other words, it's the vortex is what we refer to as the source energy part of you. The source energy part of you. And it's not just the source energy part of you that existed before you got here. It's the source energy part of you that has become as you've been requesting further. So let's say, now this could never happen, but just for sake of clarification, let's say that you come forth, you're in a human body, you live in a very feathered nest, and you never have enough contrast to ever put one thing in your vortex. Now that would never happen, but just pretend with us for a moment. Mm-hmm. Your cells have put plenty in the vortex. That's why we say, even if you are a one-celled organism, you have a vortex that you are putting intentions in. So this vortex is what we are referring to as this vibrational state of being, where the most expanded version of you is.
So it's my perception, my belief.
Well, we would like it to be your belief, but it often isn't.
Well, because I have a bad program. But if I change my program, if I change my belief system, then if I'm 95% operating off of my unconscious, then it is my vortex.
Let's back up on that a little bit, because when you're in the vortex, when someone says that you are functioning with only a part of your capability, we do not disagree with that. If you are, let's take an infant. This will stimulate your thought a little bit. A newborn baby is doing a better job of operating fully with the fullness of its being than an adult. Mm-hmm. Because the newborn baby is still more closely associated with source energy. So what exposure to life it has had and what requests it has put forth are all in alignment one with another. So this infant, that's why often when you hold a baby, you feel well-being. Yeah. Or when you look into a baby's eyes, you feel such wisdom, you see. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So our friend was talking about his initial, maybe even current discomfort with the idea of channeling. And we quite often tease about how odd it must be for some of you to explain us. We don't recommend that you try very hard to others. Yes, I'm going to this seminar where this man calls his wife Abraham. And she must be some sort of a split personality, because she keeps referring to herself as we. And she incessantly draws this big circle on the floor and calls it a vortex and tells us all we should go get in it. And when we look, there's nothing there, but we're supposed to take it on faith that there is something there. And so, but the reason that we talk about this vortex in the way that we do is because we want you to feel the reality of this vibrational state that is not easily translatable through your physical eyes, especially at first. Mm-hmm. So when someone says you're only using 5% of your capacity, we would say those in the vortex are using all of it. When you're tuned in, tapped in, turned on, this is a frequency thing that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So when you're tuned to the frequency of all that you are, then the fuller capacity of you is being evidenced in your moment.
Okay.
And a belief, you see, a belief is just a thought that you keep thinking.
Right.
So a belief is a vibration. Mm-hmm. So a belief is a thought that you've thought long enough that it's become rather chronic, so that it's easy for you to come to. A belief is a well-practiced thought. Mm-hmm. And some things that you believe are in alignment with what your source knows to be, and some things that you believe are not in alignment with what your source knows to be.
Okay, but isn't that the unconscious then? Aren't we? Isn't the reason why we behave the way we behave is because we do a lot of things unconsciously, and it's because
one of the benefits that Esther brought to this forum, to this asking and allowing and receiving experience that we're all having together, is that she was not decided or opinionated or well steeped in terms that just get in the way. And one of those terms that always gets in the way is unconscious. Because here's what's really going on. If you're feeling emotion, then you're not unconscious. In other words, if the thought that you're thinking is vibrating in a strong enough way that there's a reverberating alignment which gives you positive emotion or resistance which gives you negative emotion, then that is not an unconscious belief. That's a very active vibration.
Correct.
So rather than talking about beliefs and unconscious and even desires so much, what we want you to begin focusing on is vibration and emotion and alignment. And if you leave some of those old ways of looking at it behind for just a little while, you'll be like some of these scientists that we were talking about, and you'll get into the vortex where you'll really know what's going on.
Well, I think the scientists are really kind of leaning to in line with what you're saying.
They are for sure.
Yeah,
They
they're
are for
finding
sure.
that out. I mean, at least Dr. Bruce Lipton, I was right on it. I mean, what he's teaching is phenomenal. But I just wanted to know how your beliefs and his perception, science, kind of come into when you talk about the
we're
vortex.
visiting with you, not with him. And so we're receiving your version of him.
Right.
And in the areas where your version of what he said disagreed with our version of what we know to be, we have pointed it out.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
In other words, we're in agreement. We're in agreement that there is much more capacity. But we're explaining it through the emotion and through the vortex, because that's the only way. In other words, people have been talking about these things for a very long time, but what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with the fact that you've got 52 trillion cells?
Well, it makes
what are you
sense
going to do
now.
with that?
Well, it makes sense now if you know how your cells are operating and you know what their functions are. To me, that enlightened me more to understand what you were saying, because now I understand how my body works, the functions.
Very good.
And
Very
then
good.
so it really enhanced what you said.
We're glad.
Yeah. Thank you.